I met 18 times the president of China. I discuss human rights every time. I was the first Western leader to make a public speech on human rights in China, and it was at the University of Beijing.
Well, that's Jean Chrétien when Stephen Harper was bringing a principled approach to the Canada-Chinese relationship. By the way, trade between Canada and China continued to grow under Stephen Harper. Of course, we kept buying more of their stuff than they bought from us, in large part because we still don't have a pipeline that would sell oil to Asia. The trade relationship is very imbalanced. We buy their stuff, and I hate to be so blunt about it, but they steal our stuff. It was probably 10 years ago now that the head of CSIS said there were at least 1,000 Chinese spies in Canada. That number has only multiplied. So what would Stephen Harper advise Justin Trudeau to do if Trudeau had the courage to ask Harper? Well, I think we know someone who might be able to make a pretty educated guess about that question, because that someone is a friend of Stephen Harper and his former lawyer. I'm talking about Manny Montenegrino, the CEO of Think Sharp, who joins us now via Skype from Ottawa. Manny, great to see you again.
Nice to be with you, Ezra, as always.
You know, thank you for saying that. I think it's a good idea for prime ministers to call on old hands, past prime ministers, across party lines even. We heard from Jean Chrétien, but I think he's compromised because he does a lot of lobbying in China. Before we talk about what Harper might suggest to Trudeau, do you have a word about what Jean Chrétien keeps saying we should capitulate to China? What do you think of that?
Well, I mean, it is outrageous. You've had the prime minister and every lawyer and every senior cabinet minister say that we are a country of rule of law. And we've heard it, and that's what we are. Although Prime Minister Trudeau and 10 members of his PMO obstructed justice with the SNC Lavalin. They've obstructed justice with respect to Admiral Norman. China knows all this. And so China is perplexed, saying they keep telling us, and they know that Canada is a country of rule of law, but they've seen some cracks with Justin Trudeau, and they're hoping to fill in between those cracks. So to have, I'm very suspicious of why the former Prime Minister Chrétien, once a member of my law firm, would come out on this side and say, well, sure, let's just forget about Canada's rule of law and let's just help China the best way we can. That just astounds me, and it just puts into question the whole bona fides of that statement.
Yeah, I think that he's speaking not so much as a former prime minister, but as a current China-centric businessman whose son-in-law, Andre Desmarais, is one of the most invested businessmen in China in all of Canada. Well, let me ask you a more speculative question. I think we know why Jean Chrétien said what he said. But I think that although Stephen Harper, I don't think he likes Justin Trudeau, and I know the feeling's mutual, but I think truly that if Justin Trudeau made a private phone call to Stephen Harper, I think Harper would pick up the phone, I think he would listen, I think he would swallow whatever residual anger he might have towards Trudeau, and I think he would actually give whatever his best advice would be to Trudeau. Do you agree with me that if Trudeau actually...
Absolutely.
Yeah, I mean, who wouldn't? I would. I hate Trudeau, but if he called me and genuinely asked me something in the name of our country, I would answer my best.
Yeah, absolutely. And it would happen. And of course he would. I mean, he is, but Ezra, I think we're at a point where it's just, the ship has sailed with Trudeau. And fundamentally it starts with his inability to put his, feet into someone else's shoes, to understand either a nation or a person or a principled person. He really is tone deaf to everyone. Now, psychologists can designate a certain psychosis with that type of behavior, but there is too much evidence that if you look at what happened to the two senior cabinet ministers, you have Jane Philpott pleading, please don't do this. This will send him in. He doesn't listen to anybody. Our prime minister is only concerned about himself and only concerned about what he thinks. And so that's how we got into the problem in the first place with China. Anyone who doesn't understand that China is a very serious player and they take things extremely serious, they do not like to be insulted, they do not like to be ridiculed. And this started from the beginning when the very first meetings with the prime minister and China to sit there and lecture him or them on his 5 virtue signaling clauses on his trade deal. He was kicked out at that point in time, and he was called little potato. We went through that. Yeah. Now, like Ezra, you got to think, what kind of person doesn't understand? This is a people of 1.5, a country with 1.5 billion people. Now the second strongest economy, the biggest emitter of CO2. This is a very serious player and has a long plan. It has egregious violations to the millions of Muslims they have no rule of law. We've just gone through the 30th anniversary of Tiananmen Square. There's no record of it anymore. So if you're the Prime Minister of Canada, you've got to understand who China is. He doesn't listen to them. And so it's very hard. And the only way that we could get out of this is with help from either our best friend neighbor, United States. He's burnt that bridge deeply by backstabbing the president when they had a deal at the G20, by being the White House referring to our prime minister. There's a special place in hell for So it is really. You could have 1,000 Harpers go and see, and nothing would result at this time. There's just been too much damage, and it continues and it continues. So the other players that you might get on the world scene, and if you care about Canada and you care about those 2 young men in the Canadian jail, you muster up everything you can. We've insulted China, or the prime minister insulted China. We've basically insulted the president. The other players in the world scene would be Saudi Arabia, would be Russia. Those two might come in and help. Well, we have no diplomatic ties with Russia because the prime minister decided to lecture them on how they apply their own laws in their own country to their own citizens, which is just absurd. And as you know, there's also that kind of tension with Russia. So we are alone in the world. And the reason why we're alone in the world is very simple, Ezra. Our prime minister put his own likability ahead of the Canadian interests, ahead of our Canadian economy. And so no one's here to help because this prime minister doesn't understand that very basic concept.
Yeah. It's such a puzzle to me because Justin Trudeau is so obsequious to foreign leaders, to Cuba, for example, to China. He said it's his favorite country. And yet he managed to bungle things. In Cuba, they use those sound weapons against our diplomats. I can't think of a single country around the world that is friendlier towards Canada now than it was 4 years ago. And yet Harper was tougher on all our enemies, but had their respect.
But Ezra, that's true of everything. Now, Ezra, break it down, be analytical. Trudeau, with his love of China at the beginning, he's done that with feminism. He was a champion for feminism. And look, in reality, he is not. I think Trudeau likes these titles, likes to be something, but doesn't know how to get to it, doesn't know the hard work. And it all comes down to doesn't know the hard work. And are you true to your principles? Are you true to yourself? And that's where we fail. If you look at the feminism issue, ostensibly, everyone thought at the beginning, well, look, Well, this first time in history, two very strong principles. I mean, we've never had a cabinet minister leave cabinet because they didn't trust the prime minister.
Yeah.
These were two strong females. You couldn't get a better message to say, this person does not speak the truth. This person has no gravitas. If you can't have gravitas in your own cabinet, how do you think you're going to get it with the president of the United States, with the president of China, with anyone in the world, if you can't even get people in your cabinet to trust you?
Wow. You know, I never thought of it that way. That's such a good point. That's such a good point.
But there's,
Well, that's
there's
you know
so
what?
many points.
Manny, you unfortunately, I have to agree with you that, as you said, the ships have already sailed here. There's probably, I mean, I don't know if it's fixable, but it needs to be fixed because there are two Canadians over there, and Canadian farmers are taking it in the form of import blockages, whether, trumped up claims that Canadian canola has, some blight to, I mean, so we are suffering in various ways. Let me come back to my hypothetical scenario, and I hope you don't think that's too fantastical to do, but maybe you could play along with me anyways. You worked with Stephen Harper, you were his lawyer when he was the Prime Minister. I'm sure you gave him advice outside of narrow legal matters. If Justin Trudeau were to show a miraculous personal growth, call Stephen Harper and say, listen, I need your help. I just want you to do it for Canada. What do you think Harper's 1, 2, 3, 4 ideas would be based on your knowledge of Harper and how he's solved these problems before? Can you guess with me?
Well, you know what? It's very hard. Like, I think it's almost at an impossibility stage. I think Harper, our Prime Minister Harper, ex-Prime Minister Harper, understands and is a very, very bright man, understands who Trump is. I mean, Prime Minister Harper, his success was understanding everyone across the table. So he wasn't interested in telling the world who he was. He was very, very careful in listening to who they were. So in one aspect, the Prime Minister Harper has and knows who Donald Trump is, as I do. All you have to do is listen. And so he does have that benefit that it appears that no one in this cabinet or this prime minister cares to do. No one in Canada cares to, our media cares to listen to what this president is doing. So if you can't, they talk about, we're listening to Canadians. If you can't start listening to someone on the other side, whether you agree with them or not, if you can't start listening, you can't start solving the problem. So does Stephen Harper have the ability to listen? Absolutely. Does he have the ability to understand who he is? Absolutely. Does he have the ability to find a solution? Perhaps he does. I can't see it. I can't see it. We are in our third year of President Trump. We haven't invited him to Canada for a state dinner. Donald Trump has gone to Japan, has gone to the UK, completely full state dinners. We haven't done that. We don't have our ambassador to Canada. He was very late in appointing Kelly Craft. I think it was October, November, the latest appointment for Canadian ambassador. And now she's been elevated to the United Nations, and there's no talk of a Canadian ambassador, and no one's concerned about that. These are all facts that should tell you that pretty much America today under this government is tuned out of Canada. Yeah. They're focused on Mexico. Mexico is the #1 trading partner. It's all Mexico, Mexico, Mexico. And pretty soon, everyone's going to forget about Canada. And if that does happen, that's not a good thing. Yeah.
I look at that Shinzo Abe, if I'm pronouncing that right, the Prime Minister of Japan, and even though they have a deep language barrier, they both really seem to be trying to work together. They visit each other. They play golf together. And I know you're a golfer. Golfing's a fun game, but it's also the ultimate way for two men to slowly harmonize with each other. It's not a quick meeting. You got a few hours out there. you don't have to be intensive talking. You can laugh. You can it's a great way for two guys to get to know each other. And the Japanese are closer to America now than we are, despite the geographic and language barriers. I find that so frustrating. That should be us.
Yeah, and so should Mexico be us. I mean, we are. You're touching on a point that I don't think anyone's talking about, and that is Canada slipping away from being United States' #1 trading partner, #1 friend? And if these bonds are created on the Brexit, if Brexit does happen, and America was there, in assistance with trade or whatever, if the bonds are going to be Japan, Mexico, and the UK, Canada's and Ezra, let's add this in. Canada's special interest to America has been our oil. America has been dependent on Middle East oil until this year, or I think last year, but I think it's this year, and America is now self-sufficient. Canada was its best friend because we supplied America oil and we supplied America cheap oil. And so oil is very important to America. Once we lose that ability, and Justin Trudeau is doing everything in his ability to stop oil in Canada, we have really very little to offer America. We are going to be moving far and far away. So this oil attack is not only an attack against Alberta and against Canada's economy and these pipeline attacks, it's an attack against a very special relationship that we've built for years with America. America is moving on. It's self-sufficient. So if America, you ask yourself, if the President Trump wins another 4 years and he's looking to the north, other than being, completely envious that the NBA title is in Canada, what does Canada offer America that America can't do by itself? And that is a very, very question that has to be examined. Canada has to step up its game. It can't keep insulting America. It can't keep taking away its very essence of its main product, and it can't be lecturing them. So, I think over time, I hope that a new president comes back and is in love with Canada, and we continue this very strong relation. Because what could fall from this, Ezra, is we slip out of the G7. We're a G10 nation. We're slipping to a G11, but we're in the G7. These things can happen if America's not always thinking about its best friend, Canada.
Yeah. Manny, you're making me sad because I see our levers slipping away. And out of spite, we bought used jets from Australia instead of being a partner with America on those new F-35s. I've seen those F-35s in flight in Israel. I saw an F-15 go by. That's an amazing jet. Then I saw the F-35 go by and I said, oh my God, that is, you can see it's so it is the 25 years more modern. And we just bought the used stuff off the Aussies so they can buy F-35s. And I'm thinking, what is our place in the world? Manny, I wish I could disagree with you because you're painting a sober picture that I wish there was some more sunny ways in it, but I don't see it.
Yeah, no.
Let me just ask you to make a prediction, and it's always tough, but do you think we will get those two hostages home if Justin Trudeau, until, let's say, the October election in Canada? Do you think there's a chance those hostages are coming home before then?
Absolutely not.
Really?
I think the best thing that can happen for those two men, and Ezra, I said this before, I'm a dad and I have a son almost that age, but I have people that have done commerce in China, good friends. I think it could be them. And I think of those two men and the other two men in prison, those two Canadians. I think the only hope, China is about face. Justin Trudeau will change his mind on everything for for a bump in the polls. China doesn't do that. China will never. Do understand who China is. They've made decisions. They're not going back. Right. They punted their ambassador to France and said it's an upgrade. Right. I mean, when is France an upgrade to China? But that's what they said. Right. So it's going to escalate. They will never, with this prime minister, they will never put their foot off the gas. Our only hope is a new prime minister, a new and from that point, new relationship could be set, and from that point, those Canadians may come home, and from that point, maybe trade. But they have already, as I have, they've already written off this prime minister. They've already said no more, nothing, and they're going to escalate it. Ezra, you ask yourself. They are informed. They have lawyers. They have been told. They do know that Canada was in the middle of this extradition. It has nothing to do with us except for our laws with America to assist them. They know it's an American law that we're enforcing. It's an American extradition, but they have not taken one solitary act against America. Right. There are no Americans in jail. Because they know that this person is weak. This person the prime minister is weak. The prime minister can't be trusted. And the prime minister is alone in the world. And the prime minister will relent if we keep pressure on. Yeah. And how does a prime minister put himself and Canada in that position is beyond me.
You know, Manny, that is such a key point there. This extradition is at the behest of the United States, but not for 1 second would they think of taking an American hostage. You took an American hostage with this president, you would
Absolutely.
See trillions of dollars of sanctions. You would see the Chinese ambassador sent home from Washington. You would see an aircraft carrier set sail, and President Xi knows that, and that's why Xi Jinping. That's why they haven't touched Trump, because they
and that's why they think that they can push around Canada, because they have a weak prime minister who will say anything, do anything, and put himself ahead of his people, ahead of his economy. They are very intelligent. Yeah. I mean, it is almost insulting to think that the Chinese are not as informed as any other person.
Well, they've been doing diplomacy for 5,000 years. I mean, this is not new to them.
And they know what they're doing. They know what they're doing.
Well, just incredible. And you're right. Justin Trudeau's character will not change in the next 6 months. And so China's calculations on how to deal with someone of his character will not change either. Manny Montenegrino, what a pleasure to I feel like you're a professor and we are taking a master class. You certainly helped us through the NAFTA process, and I think you really said a lot of interesting things today. I'm going to rewatch this interview and pause it and contemplate it, because I learned a lot from you today, my friend, and I thank you for that.
No problem, Ezra. Always glad to help.
All right. There you have it. Our friend Manny Montenegrino, the CEO of Think Sharp, and he joined us via Skype from our nation's capital. That's an excerpt from the Ezra Levant show. Every day I do a video monologue, and then I interview an interesting guest, and then I end by reading my hate mail. But you've got to subscribe to it, which you can do at therebel.media/shows.